You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. LSU wrapped up spring football with a spring game on Saturday. Typically, as we do here, we do our spring recaps. People from all over the conference reach out. They want to do interviews, kind of do the same thing we do, recap spring. So I've done a bunch of those interviews here the last several days, and people inevitably ask, hey, what's the first question that everyone asks? Like literally every single interview I've done, the first question in all of them. What's the biggest difference year one to year two with Brian Kelly? Well, the biggest difference is just last year was so frenetic, and this year it's just much slower and calmer because there's a lot more settled. That's one big change. One thing that has absolutely stayed the same and will likely never change is that Brian Kelly has jokes, like when he was asked about the game ending in a tie.
Tie game. I would have went for 2.
Muse, you think that it was a dig at Bama?
Kinda. Tied game. I'd have went for 2. Remember the last time that happened?
I don't know that it was so much a dig at Bama as it was just Brian Kelly maybe alluding to the fact that he did famously go for 2 in a big ball spot, and it turned out pretty well for old BK when he did it the last time. No need here in the spring game, of course. Most importantly, though, you got everybody out of the spring game healthy, and Brian Kelly did talk about just the overall outcome coming out of the spring game and this second spring in Baton Rouge.
You know, it was what we had hoped it to be, in the sense that, as you saw, we tried to do some situational work and some special teams that allowed us to shorten the format a little bit, because we, as you know, we're thin on the offensive line. First and foremost, we got out of it clean, no injuries, which is always important as you look at the overall impact of a game like this. I thought we got, strong play, across the board. I think our safety play needs to continue to get better at the second level. We missed some tackles, but all in all, a good day out there today for us to evaluate and, take a step forward.
15 practices. So much of that is finding answers to questions that you have, or beginning the process of answering those questions. So when you hit fall camp, you have something steady and something that is kind of in place already. There are things we know. Jaden Daniels is your starting quarterback. You return 6 of your top 7 offensive linemen. We know that Harold Perkins is going to be an inside backer, and we know a lot of the guys, who they are, where they're going to be, etc. Brian Kelly was asked about the quarterback play in the spring game, and you got to see all 3 guys run out there. Here's what Brian Kelly had to say.
The quarterback was, and Daniels was very efficient, played very well. I thought Garrett Nussmeier equally as efficient, and at times doesn't have the same protection that Jaden does. And given those circumstances, you can make the case that he was equally, if not better, in some instances. So pleased with the quarterbacks.
Mike Denbrock, a couple of weeks ago, when asked about the receivers, said Kyron Lacey was the guy that stood out this spring, and he sure showed it on Saturday.
So Kyron, really, the work that he's been doing is much more about, consistent approach in practice. And, I think we're starting to see how that's translating to performance. He was, I think at times trying to find himself relative to where he fit. And I think he's comfortable in where he is in our rotation now. And his practice work ethic has been consistent, and we can see it in terms of the way he's playing.
When you look at the receiving group, it's the deepest spot on LSU's team offensively, and you could argue either side of the ball. Malik Neighbors is awesome. Brian Thomas is a really physical, strong receiver who's certainly a game breaker as well. You had a guy like Aaron Anderson from Alabama. That's not even to mention guys like Chris Hilton and Landon Ibieta, who had a long touchdown catch and run in the spring game. There's guys I'm leaving off. Let's not even include Shelton Sampson, a 5-star coming in. You are loaded at receiver. You lose Kayshon Boutte and Jeray Jenkins. You need guys to step up. Kyron Lacy is showing you he is more than capable of being that guy. He just needed the reps. He just wasn't going to get them ahead of the other guys that were there. The benefit of waiting your turn, and now he's waited his turn, and he's going to get his chance. One other thing offensively that a lot of people have talked about is John Emery. I want to remind you, we're going to let you hear what Brian Kelly said after the spring game, but let's go back to the start of spring. Okay, when 6 weeks ago, it's hard to believe, it's like LSU really just lengthened out spring, pre-fall break and all, or spring break and all that stuff. Anyway, here's what Brian Kelly said in March before spring started.
John is focused strictly right now on his academics, and so he's got some marks that he has to hit from an academic standpoint before we talk about football with him. That was the deal with John, is in talking to his family, is that if his primary focus was academics and taking care of his degree, then we would have a conversation about football. And so right now his focus is 100% on that.
Okay, so you fast forward as we're moving toward final exams for the spring semester. John Emery, who does not need spring football. Again, I'm gonna underscore, bold, italicize. He's going into his 5th year. He is your most dynamic athlete at the running back spot. John Emery does not need spring practice. He don't need it. He just needs to be eligible in the fall. Here's what Brian Kelly said Saturday after the spring game.
We have not ruled out John Emery for returning. I think I've made it pretty clear that John has a path back, but it's one that is really dictated by what he does academically. So, look, we have not made any misleading statements. We love him, but we're putting academics first and foremost, and he's got to take care of that first.
No wavering, and I very much respect that. Here's the other thing I'll say. If John Emery were not going to be playing football for LSU this fall, John Emery would be in the NFL right now. He would be preparing for the NFL draft. Like, we know John Emery's going to be there. Like, he is going to be there come fall, ready to play. And if the approach is, hey, get your degree so the fall is about football, like we've seen with other guys. We saw it with Joe Burrow. Hey, maybe take like an online course or something like that. Okay, take care of your academics now in spring so that's not something that's going to be hovering over your head in the fall. A couple of other things. Maybe the biggest question moving forward is who wins the jobs in your secondary? I've said this often. I feel like you are more talented in your secondary today than you were a year ago, but you lose Jark Bernard Converse. You lose Cody Dickerson. You lose Mekhi Gardner. Okay, Colby Richardson. But it's pretty good that I can just roll it like that, huh? You lose Jay Ward. You lose Joe Fouché. Guys who were the cornerstones of your secondary. I mean, the only guys that are back really are Greg Brooks and Major Burns. And Burns was injured last year. Remember, he had the neck injury, like super weird thing that happened. So you are losing a ton of production, but you're probably more talented in your secondary. You are more talented in your secondary this year than last. Here was Brian Kelly coming out of spring, talking about that cornerback battle going into the summer.
We saw some good things, clearly, but it's work in progress for all of those guys in terms of, where they need to get to for the fall. JK and Denver and Alexander, all three of them are still, in that process for us in terms of weight room, in terms of the defense itself, and just the consistency of doing it at a high level. They're not there yet. We believe they can get there. We saw glimpses of it today. We saw glimpses of LaTerrence, his play today. I just think that we're not there yet. We think we've got some guys that are capable of playing at a high level, but there's still work to be done.
That's not even to include Deuce Chestnut, the Syracuse transfer who did not participate in spring but is expected to be a go. LaTerrence Welsh had a nice day on Saturday in the spring game. I thought he made some nice plays and flashed a little bit. So you've got options. The thing that we've talked about here with Denver Harris is I've asked people kind of around, and listen, No, I'm not a scout. I'm not like breaking down game film scouting people. I lean on people who know way more than me to tell me these things. They say with a guy like Denver Harris, they love the athleticism, but a guy that's just basically played man his whole life because he's more athletic. So you got to learn how to play some zone, know what your responsibilities are other than just you guard him, right? So that's kind of what Brian Kelly is alluding to there, but you got a ton of options. One more, and that is, look, as much as we talked about special teams, Damian Ramos had a very nice year. He steadied himself and had a very solid year for LSU, but Brian Kelly was adamant that job is not settled either.
It's clearly not a position where we've decided on who the starting kicker is. I think Ramos and Dybert are still competing, for that kicking position. We saw today that, both of them had misses. So, we have to keep an open mind on it, and we still have to keep them competing.
Ramos, of course, was your handled field goals, PATs. Dybert handled your kickoffs a year ago. If nothing else changes, those are your guys going into the season in the same spot, but you can certainly leave that open. So LSU comes out of year 2, spring football under Brian Kelly, healthy with some guys emerging like Kyron Lacey, who's probably the most notable to mention there. Thin because of injury, but you had the luxury of holding guys out. You didn't see Mason Taylor. You didn't see John Emery like we talked about. You didn't see Mason Smith or Jalen Lee or Jordan Jefferson. A lot of the defensive linemen that you brought in. You didn't see Mekhi Wingo this spring. A lot of guys you're going to be counting on come fall didn't participate because you didn't need them to participate. The bigger overarching picture with this football team is you're talented, you're deep. Just get everybody healthy and playing their best come September. Because if you can find a way to bring your best every Saturday over 12 regular season games, you're going to find yourself back in Atlanta with a chance to play yourself into the college football playoff. That's what's on the line for this team this year, and I think they all know it. And it's really just a matter of taking it a day at a time and get there. All the cliches are applicable. But if you're a fan of LSU and you're excited today and optimistic about the fall, you should be, because this team is capable of beating every team on its schedule, provided they're healthy and playing their best. So it's on Brian Kelly and staff to get them there. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.